Good morning and welcome to Downtown Download, a COVID resource and recovery webinar from the Downtown Partnership of Baltimore and Councilman Eric Costello, my co-host this morning. Thank you. I'm Shalonda Stokes, the president of Downtown Partnership, and I have the pleasure today of bringing you some amazing guests, some information. Just want to start off giving you a lay of the land for what's happening today. I will talk a little bit really briefly about some things that are going on at Downtown Partnership. I'll transition it to my co-chair of the Mayor's COVID-19 Small Business Recovery Task Force, Eric Costello. He'll tell you what's going on the business front and also in our city. And then he will proceed with asking our guests some questions, followed by, I'll come back and pose some of the questions that we get from you, the audience, to our panelists today. So I encourage you to please use your question and answer box that's in the bottom of your screen to write your answers, write your questions all throughout, and towards the end, we'll make sure that we get back to them. Just a couple highlights that are happening in our city across the board, just some amazing things that are going on. Downtown Partnership would like to send a belated Happy Father's Day to all of the fathers out there. Hopefully had a nice Sunday, a relaxing Sunday, whether you stayed in or went to one of the restaurants downtown. We want to wish you that. We also wanted to, we celebrated Juneteenth this past Friday, and Downtown Partnership did that with a feature and highlight of Black businesses taking over our social pages. We also want to announce that the fourth Friday of every month, we're going to have Black Business Friday, and we're doing that as a celebration of music and business and highlights in Center Plaza, which is one of our amazing areas that are in here. So please stay tuned for more of that, and we'll have some at the end. For today, I just want to make the transition that unlike, a lot of cities and what's happening with professional sports teams, we're fortunate in Baltimore to have our pro stadiums right in the heart of our city. If you work in downtown, you live in downtown, you know the pleasure of tailgating along Pratt Street or Cross Street Market and then walking over to the game. The economic benefit of each game is tremendous, bringing in tens and thousands of not only fans, but to just everybody into our city. And there's a lot of emotional connection to what we have. You see, I have on black today. I see the councilman and Jennifer have on their shades of orange. So we're representing the Orioles in a big way. We know that, like many of us, they had to limit their relationships with their fans and their players and shift to virtual, as we're all starting to do. So this morning, we look forward to hearing how they're doing that, how they've been preparing to play the games again, and everything from the recent player drafts to offsite training with athletes. We're excited about the show today and what's happening at Camden Yards. Just to give you a little bit of insight on our guests, this is background. I know the councilman, you'll get into the deep of them, but our first guest, Jennifer Grondahl, was named Senior Vice President of Community Development and Communications for the Orioles. Her job is to reach out beyond the ballpark's walls and into the community by building and maintaining relationships with partners, community leaders, civic organizations, fans, and the media. Before that, she ran community partnerships for the team's Sarasota, Florida facility, where it holds its spring training, and I believe she may be down there. So we'll hear from her in a minute, and then we'll also hear from Ben. And Ben was one of the Orioles' first overall #1 draft picks out of LSU back in '89. His first major league start in July of 1990, he pitched a complete game shutout against the Chicago White Sox, an impressive start to his 7 seasons with the Orioles. And so I know we'll hear more, Councilman, as you start to dig in with him. I'd like to transition it to you if you could just give us a few insights on what's happening in our city and with the task force.
Thanks, Shalonda, and Ben and Jennifer, thanks a lot for joining us today. We'll be brief in the updates. First, as I'm sure everyone is aware, Mayor Young announced that we're moving to phase 2 of our business reopening this past Friday. I am including in the chat window that press release, which walks through everything that has been reopened, along with a link to Facebook, because that's the only place I have it, with a nice infographic that you can share regarding what's opened. And the short of it is, most things have been reopened at 50%. That includes faith-based entities, Churches, mosques, temples, etc., will be permitted to reopen for 50% indoor services. Retail establishments and malls, personal services. So that's not just your barbershops and hairstylists, but that's also beauty salons, getting your nails done, tattoo parlors, tanning salons, massage parlors, etc. Recreational establishments such as bowling alleys, pool halls, etc., are 50%. All food service establishments, that's restaurants and bars, clubs, social clubs, are at 50%. Fitness centers, gyms, 50%. Daycare facilities will be allowed to have up to 15 individuals per classroom. Youth camp programs have been up to 15 people. Libraries are at 50%. The Baltimore Zoo, the National Aquarium and Museums, 50%. Non-essential offices, I know we have a number of major office tenants in downtown. Those are at 50%. Indoor and outdoor pools are at 50%. I will note that city public pools have not yet opened, but we're eagerly anticipating when that can happen. Sports activities, 50%. Youth sports gatherings, etc. And the casino will be open at 50% as well. So with that, I did include that information in the chat window, so please feel free to review that and share that. The only impacted city service right now that I think is of note to everyone is trash collection. We talked about this briefly last week, but I just want to remind everyone that there are continued issues with trash and recycling collection. Recycling collection is not expected to resume until the beginning of July. There have been a number of issues, but the long story short of it is that a number of employees within the solid waste division who have either contracted COVID-19 and tested positive or have been in contact with someone who has it. So they are self-quarantining, but we're starting to see our workforce slowly come back. So we want to make sure we're doing everything we can as a city to protect our employees, protect our citizens, recognizing that trash does need to get picked up. Our crews that have been working overtime, and I mean literally overtime. All last week we had trash crews that were out until 9 p.m. at night. So I ask that you please continue to be patient. If you see folks that are picking up your trash, please be sure to say thank you. They're some of the hardest working folks in our city, and we certainly couldn't get by without their support. So with that, Shalonda, I'll turn it back over to you before we get started.
Thank you so much, Councilman, for those updates. I think at this point we'll shift into the question and answer session. I just want to make sure that I remind our attendees, please, if you have questions of either of our guests, of anybody on here, please put that in your question and answer box, and we'll get to that towards the end. And so, Councilman, if you would take it away with the first set of questions, we're excited to hear.
Thanks, Shalonda. Appreciate it. We're going to start with Jennifer. Jennifer, I'm so excited to have you and Ben on today to talk about baseball. I'm heartbroken that baseball hasn't started yet. I've been watching some Korean League baseball games in the morning at 5 in the morning on ESPN, trying to get myself mentally prepared for the baseball season to start. But just because we haven't had the opening day yet doesn't mean that the organization isn't incredibly busy. I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about the community building work that you're doing and how players, the staff, the organization as a whole is staying in touch with our fan base as we get ready for opening day.
Thank you so much. First of all, I just want to thank you for having us today. I know Ben and I are really excited, especially to be able to talk about baseball and to talk about Baltimore and just, it's our beloved city. And I know that there are a lot of people right now that are struggling and want to get on the other side of this. And baseball, certainly the return to baseball represents that in many ways. And so I think starting the season for us would be a strong way to say, you know what, we're back. And I also think that through this time, people have been really appreciating sort of the simpler things in life. And I consider baseball to be one of those simpler things. In terms of how we're engaging with our fans, we had to pivot, just like a lot of businesses have had to pivot. And we knew that we wanted to connect with organizations in our community that were leading the response with COVID-19, that were working on the front lines and telling their stories using our platforms, The Grind with Melanie Newman, and bringing guests on Orioles podcast so that our fans can hear about baseball, and also playing, some of those old school memorable games that people love. But ultimately, we wanted to show Baltimore that just because we don't have baseball doesn't mean that we can't use our platform to elevate those organizations that are working to keep our community safe, fed. You may have read that we had a massive effort at Camden Yards with World Central Kitchen for 6 or so weeks, and the city of Baltimore was incredibly instrumental in working with us to pull that off, as thousands, tens of thousands of people were fed through that effort. The other effort that continues, and we expect and hope will be continued past this week, is the Salvation Army that is feeding 10,000 people a day from Camden Yards. And right before we broke for this unfortunate situation, March 13th is when we closed our offices. We had just launched our new employee volunteer program called Orange and Black Gives Back. So not only is it us sending the message out to the fans to get involved in efforts like the Salvation Army or the Maryland Food Bank or the Baltimore Tool Bank, it's also our employees who are getting out there, and about 25% of our employees have volunteered in some way during this time period, which I'm really proud of. And then our players have been absolutely incredible. You can imagine that they want to be playing baseball. I mean, we know that, but they've been also using their platforms, whether it's buying masks, Brandon Hyde and Mike Elias purchasing masks for those frontline workers, or delivering meals to the healthcare workers, writing notes to people that are living in nursing homes who are isolated and alone, and quite frankly are like that much of the time. It's really been an incredibly collective effort. And with our digital programming, Thursday night, I'm sure you've seen some of our guys reading to their kids. Chris Davis, I watched Mike Elias. I'm also a fan. I don't just work here. I'm also a fan. Mike Elias reading to his daughter last week was extra special because, I work with him every day, and just an incredible thinker, and to see him connecting with his daughter like that. Again, we're trying to connect with people and what people are going through right now. Educational programming through Summer Slugger and keeping kids reading and doing math. It's been interesting. Our team is working hard, and we're open to ideas for those who have suggestions for the content they want to see. But I'm really proud of our organization.
Thank you, and thank you for everything the Orioles continue to do in our community. I know that we're all very proud to have the Orioles call Baltimore City their home. One of the things that I think is on everyone's mind right now, if you're a diehard baseball fan, has been the ongoing negotiations between the Players Union and the owners. We had a major development last evening. Major League Baseball, specifically the owners, were given the right to basically say that they want to hold a 60 game season based on some contractual terms from March. Where do you see things going from here? We recognize you're probably limited in what you can share, but I think what we all want to hear from you is tell us there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and that open day is coming soon.
Well, Ben, we can both say there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's obviously, it's challenging to see this, the state of baseball where we are. But ultimately, I think it's like anything. Everybody is struggling to find how they're going to move forward. And baseball is really not different in that way. But I can tell you that I'm in Sarasota, Florida right at this moment. My car is about packed. I'm heading back to Baltimore. I can't wait to get back to Baltimore. And we're going to have a baseball season. It's not going to look like the baseball seasons in the past, at least for the time being. I think that we're all going through this experimental process. And you mentioned the Korean Baseball League. I watch a lot of tennis, watching European leagues and soccer and others playing, and now starting to think about adding fans at a reduced capacity. I think all of those things are on the table. And I just think that we have to get started first, and how that's going to look as players on the field playing baseball. You know, you can watch MASN and see Ben talking about the games, and we're going to do the best we can to give you the in-game experience that you're used to with a twist. But of course you won't be at Camden Yards, and we would ultimately like to be there with everybody. But I'm incredibly optimistic that I'll be driving in 48 hours back to Baltimore. So I think that's the best that I can answer.
That's somewhat of a light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you. You know, one of the things that we're grappling with in Baltimore, and I think across the entire country, besides COVID-19, is the Black Lives Matters movement.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, back in 2015, as many people will recall, Baltimore City found itself at the center of the nation's attention with what happened with Freddie Gray. And there was a game played at Camden Yards with no fans in the stadium. I know that the Orioles organization has been a longtime supporter of the Black Lives Matter movement. If you could talk about where you see yourselves in the current climate, especially with respect to the tragic killing of George Floyd, and just in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement.
I mean, honestly, I woke up and saw that, and I can't even express to you the feelings that I had. I had a conversation with Brandon Hyde on Monday, and he was so passionate about what he felt his responsibility was as the manager. And he brought the players together. This is something probably nobody knows, because we don't always do everything in the public. And that's another thing that makes me really proud to be part of this organization. It's kind of what happens behind the scenes and how we take our responsibilities so seriously. But Brandon brought the players together to talk about it, because, you know, this affects all of us, and we're in the midst of an awakening. And we made a statement, and statements and words are powerful. And I was really proud of the statement we made, because it was authentic. It's truly what we believe as an organization. And more importantly, we're going to follow that with deeds. And I think you're right. You mentioned in 2015, and John Angelos, someone that, you know, I'm incredibly proud to work for, standing up and saying, you know what, there's a problem. And as I said, we're in the midst of an awakening as a society that I don't think what happened should have had to have happened for us to be here. But if that's what creates the kind of change that we need in society, you know, that is probably the only good that I can say that would come of it. But you're going to start seeing more from our organization on this topic. We're talking. We're trying to be really thoughtful. We don't want to do something. We're not checking boxes like let's do this and say we've done our work here. This is a long-term proposition. You know, it really. I was thinking a lot about it yesterday. It hasn't been that long in our country that we've had segregation. That wasn't really that long ago in our history. So we have generational changes that we need to make here. And I think one of the things, you know, empowering people to vote, you know, giving people, we have access to audiences, we have a platform, and we can certainly do our part in that regard. I've had some conversations with staff about what this has meant to them and being afraid that they're going to miss the opportunity to make the kind of change that needs to be made. And I take that really, really seriously. And we've included even on our website resources that you might not think about, which is one that I had really honestly not thought about until it was brought to me by an employee at the Orioles. Therapy, talking about this and the trauma associated with this. So we've added to our website and are pushing out some of the resources that are available and organizations that are working on the front lines of social justice and systemic change. So yes, the Orioles are going to continue to take the lead on this matter. And I think you'll see that again in a very thoughtful way and demonstrative way moving forward.
Thank you. It's obviously been a huge week for baseball, as I mentioned earlier. And it's also been a big week for the team, including discussions about a new lease that would not just keep the Orioles in what I believe is the best stadium in Major League Baseball, but allow for more non-baseball events like the sold-out Billy Joel concert that was held last year. And I believe that was the first concert that was ever held at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. Can you talk a little bit more about what you see as the vision for some of the non-baseball programming and events at Camden Yards? Because it's such an incredible facility. It's frequently referred to as the best stadium in baseball. And that's not just me, that's sports critics from across the country.
Yeah, in fact, I just read a story with sports writers across the country ranking their favorite baseball stadium, and Camden Yards was selected of the top one or two across the board. It's really special. Camden Yards, the Orioles have driven 75 million people to downtown Baltimore. And I think we have a responsibility to the community. We are unique. A lot of stadiums in this country are out in the rural parts of the community, and it's perfect for this forum because we are downtown. And there are businesses and hotels, restaurants that are affected by the what we can drive to downtown Baltimore. And whether that's baseball or another iconic concert like Billy Joel and some of the other entertainment that we're exploring, we have a commitment to year-round programming in downtown Baltimore to drive another 75 million people. And that's what we're going to be working towards with the lease. Discussions have begun, as you mentioned. That's really where we're at right now, but we're committed to being downtown. We're committed to Baltimore. And I can tell you that there's a lot of creative heads thinking about how to enhance the ballpark to continue to create that iconic experience, but also to add what fans today and what the community today wants. So I'm really excited to see how that unfolds.
Great, thank you. Ben, I want to transition over to you for a couple of questions more in detail on baseball and specifically where you see the Orioles. You were a number one overall draft pick by the Orioles back in 1989. LSU Tiger, go Tigers. We've had two successful drafts in a row right now. And I think that, from what I saw in the draft, the organization really stuck to Mike Elias's plan. He's the GM of the Orioles. What's your assessment of this class, and who are you particularly excited about?
Well, I'll tell you, I love what Mike Elias is doing. You talked about last year's draft and, Adley Rutschman and the high school kid Henderson, Kyle Stowers were some of the top picks in last year's draft back in 2019. But, you got to remember Mike's history and where Mike came from and the success he had with the Astros. And if you go back, the Astros lost 100 games, I think it was 3 years in a row. They lost like 97 the fourth year. And then they make the playoffs, and the following year they win the World Series. So Mike has a game plan. He was a big part of what went on in Houston, and he's kind of carried that here to the Orioles, and he's using that same blueprint as what it appears is he used there. So you have to trust what Mike's doing. Mike's kind of been there. He's overseen a rebuild, which is what the Orioles are clearly in the middle of right now. And he had a lot of success with the Astros after about 4 years of that. And so while we all want it to happen tomorrow and we want to be a contender again tomorrow, the truth is it takes some time. The Oriole minor league system, frankly, had been down over the years, although there's some really good prospects down there. You talk about Grayson Rodriguez and D.L. Hall in previous drafts. There is some talent, a lot of talent in that minor league system, but as a whole, it was down a little bit. And you saw Mike come in last year, had a real strong draft, and the Orioles were more active in the international market than they've ever been, signed a lot of kids from the international market to inject into, because if you hear Mike talk in the front office, they were trying to and still are trying to inject as much talent as they can into this organization to kind of get it built up from the bottom. That is the idea, to inject as much as you can. Now, you talk about this year's draft. It was a little bit of a surprise. The Orioles took Heston Kjerstad with the number 2 overall pick out of University of Arkansas. I've seen Heston play a bunch because I do cover a lot of college baseball, especially the Southeastern Conference where Heston is. And it was a surprise because some folks thought that, you know, we're going to take Austin Martin from Vanderbilt, who's a really good talent too. But at the end of the day, Kjerstad to me was the best left-handed college bat in the entire draft. You talk about a young man who hit 13 home runs his freshman year, 17 home runs his sophomore year, and in just a split time this year, had 6 or 7 home runs. That would have projected him to about 23 or 24 home runs in the SEC. That would have by far led the best conference in all of college baseball, the Southeastern Conference. So I love the pick there. Jordan Westberg is a kid from Mississippi State that the Orioles took with their 2nd round draft pick, a shortstop, a big physical kid. You know, and on down the line, Hudson Haskins was an outfielder I saw from Tulane. I've seen a lot of these kids, and Servideo, of course, played at Ole Miss, and I've seen him a lot too. So I really like this year's draft. And it appears if you go back to 2012, if you'll remember, Mike Elias took Carlos Correa with number 1 overall from the Astros, which he wasn't supposed to be picked number 1. So he got him at number 1, but he saved a little bit of money in the slot value, and he poured that into the back end of his draft. And if you remember Lance McCullers Jr., they kind of went to the high school route and got McCullers away from a college commitment and threw some more money. That's exactly what Mike Elias did here, is he got Heston Kjerstad, I think, for under slot value. And as you've seen, the Orioles have already signed Mayo and Baumler, the 5th and the 6th picks that they had at over slot out of high school, and poured that money into the bottom part of the draft, what the Orioles got this year. So I'm really excited at the direction that Mike has taken the team the last 2 drafts. I think it's really going to pay off with what the Orioles have in the system right now. It's going to pay off. And again, it can't happen fast enough, right? But when you continue to build your minor league systems, if you go through these teams that have a lot of success, it's because the minor league system is strong. And that's where you got to start with the foundation of a strong minor league system. And then when you think you have a real shot to win with what you've developed through your system, that's when you go out and you spend some money in free agency, and you hope that puts you over the top and you become a contender again.
Thanks, Ben. Being a former draft pick, there's a whole experience to going through a draft and the anticipation leading up to your selection. With COVID-19, with the use of metrics, just how much things have changed. What do you think that players this year, some of the young players that were drafted by the Orioles and across Major League Baseball, may have experienced that was different, or may not have experienced that players like yourself in the past did have the opportunity to experience?
Well, we've always struggled when to have the Major League draft, right? I mean, it's been kicked around. For the first year ever, it was going to be in Omaha, Nebraska on an off day right before the College World Series. So that was going to be really cool for some of these players that were participating in the College World Series to be able to sit back and watch it live. Because in previous years, I mean, if you remember Kyle Stowers, the outfielder from Stanford in last year's draft, he was actually on the field in the Super Regional while the draft was going on. And he actually heard from somebody in the stands that he had been drafted by the Orioles in the 3rd round. So we've always kicked around when to have the draft. It's always been a difficult time for Major League Baseball to hold the draft, and we've never really landed on a great time for it. I remember my draft, as you were talking about, heck, it ended up being the first day of the College World Series, and LSU was in the College World Series, and so I had to go to a press conference at noon that day, talk about being drafted number 1, answer a million questions, and then pitch the opening day for the LSU Tigers, which was just 3 hours later, Game 1 of the College World Series. So that was a very difficult time to try to navigate through all that, to stay focused on what you're trying to do. I love the fact it got pushed to where it was before COVID hit. It was going to be on an off day. But, you know, we always talk about, and Jennifer kind of landed on it too, is that, you know, while this has been terrible for a lot of folks, and it still is with COVID's going on and everything, but it's also given us an opportunity to kind of get to know our families again, to spend some time with our families. My son has been home from college. He's a pitcher at LSU Uniston Junior College. So I've got some real time to get to know my son again, to spend some time with my wife again. Normally we'd be all busy this year running 100 miles an hour. We're doing baseball stuff. But I think for a lot of these kids that just got drafted, they were able to be home with their families, be home with mom and dad. Although they weren't able to be at the draft, at least they got to experience it as a family. So there's a lot of good things that have come out of all this. It's been a terrible time. It continues to be a terrible time. I do see the light at the end of the tunnel. To me, baseball getting back, there's nothing more that screams a little bit of normalcy in our life. To see America's pastime back on the field, to me, that just screams normality, I guess, in some ways. And so I'm so excited that baseball is just around the corner, about to get started. But it was also a good time for these kids to actually get home with mom and dad and their families and their loved ones and be able to experience the once-in-a-lifetime deal of getting drafted in the Major League Baseball draft.
Thanks, Ben. As you know, baseball players are more superstitious than any other athlete. You know, baseball is a long, grueling season, 162 games. And there's a lot of routine that's baked into that. And this year is certainly an anomaly. You had spring training starting up, and then all of a sudden COVID-19 hits. Can you talk a little bit about how Brandon Hyde and the coaching staff have been working with the players, especially from a distance, to make sure that they're in shape and they're ready to go once opening day hits?
Yeah, you know, that's been very difficult. You know, I try to go back to my time during the last work stoppage back in 94 and 95. We were sent home right at the end of the 94 season to stay in shape, to be ready and expecting to get back to playing baseball. Of course, we all know that didn't happen. But the difficult challenge for the kids today was the fact that because of the lockdown, you couldn't really get out of your house at the beginning. A lot of the players didn't have a place to go work out to try to stay in shape. They were trying to do some things on their own, which becomes very difficult. Now, things have started to loosen up a little bit, and you've been able to go out to certain clinics and batting cages and pitching and throw some hitters and all that kind of stuff. So it's been a little bit better as of late, but it's been a challenge, you know. And if you talk to Brandon Hyde and Doug Broquel, the pitching coach, Don Long, the hitting coach, there's been a lot of these type meetings with each individual players, right? Each hitter's, okay, what are we working on? This is what I saw in spring training. This is what you did last year. These are the things I think you need to continue to work on. It's what we were working on in spring training, both from a pitching standpoint and a hitting standpoint as well. So I know Doug Broquel, speaking to him, Don Long, they have been having a ton of Zoom calls with all the players, talking about things that they liked about spring training, what they think the goals were, and then where they were going to be when things resumed with spring training coming up, and what they were going to try to accomplish and achieve in a short amount of time. Because it looks like, you know, July 1st is going to be a spring training start, and it looks like we may be playing baseball opening day around the 23rd, 24th of July. So it's coming quick. I think some kids will be a little bit ahead of others because of maybe some facilities they had to work out in, and others didn't quite have the resources to stay in shape and do exactly what they wanted to do. But you can be sure of one thing, now that the deal is pretty much done, it's going to be a big ramp up of really getting ready with about a month to play. Got
it. Shalonda, as I always do at least once per week on Downtown Download, I have to go off script here. I was so excited to have Ben and Jennifer on the show that I've been texting a bunch of friends that are baseball fans saying, here's the upcoming show on Tuesday morning. Do you have any good questions for these folks? You know, and I got a lot of questions about when's baseball going to start, the contract negotiations, how are players staying in shape. But I got one question from a friend, and I thought it had to be a joke. It couldn't be a serious question. So before agreeing to ask the question, I did a little research, and I came across a Sun Sentinel article on the internet from 1990. And I have to ask this question, Ben. The question was, are you still wrestling alligators?
No, I'm not ever going to do it again. You know, that's something, you know, believe it or not, there is a lot of alligators down here. And, you know, it's just something we grew up with. I probably took some chances many years ago that I probably shouldn't have. I'd like to say I'm a little smarter than what I used to be, but I don't know that I am. Yeah, we still mess around with them a little bit. I'm not as eager to play with them as I used to be. I like to think I'm a little bit smarter now. Yeah, I could almost say I don't hardly deal with them almost anymore. But it was something that we did do a lot of, and people got the wrong idea. There were shirts made when I got to Baltimore years ago. It's not like we were, jumping off on these 9 and 10 foot alligators. Most of the ones we were catching were the smaller ones, 3 or 4 foot long, and catch them and release them and let them go, whatever, And so it's something that I did a lot of many years ago, and I don't do as much of it anymore.
Thanks, Ben. And I have to tell you, I think I speak for most of the audience. A 3 or 4 foot alligator seems pretty big to me. But I'm gonna transition over to Shalonda for some questions from our audience.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you, Jennifer and Ben. Just a wealth of information there. And I don't even know how I follow up with the question after that one, Councilman. But I'll start with you, Jennifer. We're getting quite a few in, and this is a transition just around what's happening with restaurants. So our first question for you is: Dempsey's open? And if not, is there a plan for when that could happen?
Dempsey's is not open currently, and I haven't heard about a plan for that yet. I don't have an answer on that, but I will look into it and see what I can find out, and I'll send a message to you and Eric with an answer. But I think with even when we entertain the idea of fans returning, there'll be so many requirements that will need to be met to keep people safe with all of the COVID-19 restrictions, that it will be a process. So it's not in the plans at this moment.
Okay, sounds good. And I think that's a reminder for me to let our audience know that the webinar details are going to be posted on our website. Go to Downtown Baltimore, you'll be able to see the webinar. And then Jennifer, anything else, we'll make sure that we communicate with the audience that we get on the back end as well. Ben, I'm gonna go to you. This one is an easy one, although I have some hard ones for you coming, but who is the most fun to work with in the booth?
Oh gosh. Boy, I tell you, I've had a lot. I've been really fortunate. I never set out to do this. I kind of fell into it many years ago over at LSU and doing some LSU games. But, Gary Thorne is wonderful to work with. They call him the voice for a little guy. He's got such the deepest voice there is. And he really has done so much stuff. He's done the hockey and Little League World Series. It's really an honor for me to work with him. Jim Hunter was great and still is great. Joe Angel was one of my favorite. I know he's a longtime Oriole broadcaster who's since been retired, but I thought Joe Angel was awesome, and people always ask me, they say, what's the most difficult thing about doing what you do? And I always tell people, remembering how hard the game was to play. That's the most difficult thing for me, because when you sit up in the booth and you look down on it, the game looks easy sometimes. But then when I go back to my playing days, I always put myself, before I begin to speak on TV or on radio, I put myself back in the player's shoes, and I put myself back in my experiences with baseball, and I remember how hard the game really is. And so that's why I try to be as honest as I am. I mean, I'm an honest guy. If the ball should have been caught, I'm going to say that ball probably should have been caught. If somebody, messed up, I'm going to say that. That's what I get paid to do. But also remember that it's a difficult game to do. But going back to the broadcasters, I think, Gary Thorne is awesome. Jim Palmer's, and I hardly ever get to work with him, although we were going to get to do the opening day together. We're going to have a 3-man booth, and hopefully we still do that. So I've never actually worked with Jim before, but he's always been one of the guys I've always looked up to. And so those probably are my favorite guys when we're talking about Oriole broadcasters over the years being able to work with.
Sounds good. Thank you. I don't know if I shared with the audience. I had my, not baseball, but my softball back in the day. I was a pitcher and I'm a lefty. So I played first base as well. So I have a little bit of skills.
Yeah.
little something, if this President Downtown Partnership doesn't work out. No, I'm just kidding. But no, one of the things, Ben, coming back to you, with the O's seem much more involved, I think, in the international leagues. How are we changing our talent pipeline to take advantage of player development in places like the Dominican Republic, some other things?
Well, that's one thing that Mike realized what was going on, with the Orioles in previous years, is that the Orioles, compared to other organizations out there had not been as involved in that international market. And that is a huge market. I mean, there is some big time talent in the international market. You can go back and look at the players that are in the big leagues right now and some of the organizations that have been very active. It just gives you a bigger pool to draw talent into your organization. So there are some academies going up in the international market for the Orioles where you actually develop kids. You sign them, you develop them, you put them in your organization or your program for a while, and then you bring them into your minor league system. That's one thing Mike did. I think it's going to really pay dividends. And again, it's not something you're going to see overnight. You're not going to see a big boom overnight, but over the course of 2 or 3 years, you're going to see all of this begin to come together for the Orioles. Because, you know, I always say when people ask me down here about the Orioles, I always compare it to SEC football, right? SEC football is one of the toughest football conferences in all the country. You can't be just kind of good to compete in the SEC in football. It's the same way in the American League East, right? When you got the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Blue Jays and the Rays, you can't be kind of good to compete. You got to be really good if you're going to compete because the division is so strong day in and day out. And so that's where the Orioles are building to be really good one day. And I think it's coming. If we can be patient and trust Mike Elias, I think 3 years from now, the Orioles are going to be a team that you go, okay, this team's got a real shot to win because of what's happened 4 and 5 years previous.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Jennifer, some questions are coming in for you and some kudos. This one, as a season ticket holder, just want to say how much I appreciate your ongoing communication and flexibility during this challenging time. How do you envision Birdland membership over the shortened season?
Well, we thank you very much for the kudos. We appreciate it. We made a decision that we were going to do the best that we could for our Birdland members. They're sticking by us. They're being really patient. We know that they want to be at the ballpark. So we offered a 125% credit to be used, whether it's 2020 season, 2021, or 2022, so people have flexibility. And we've had a really positive response to that. I think it's one of the best in all of Major League Baseball. And for those people that are not able to, they're struggling, they're wondering, their financial situation has changed dramatically because of this. We're also offering refunds to people. I think our Birdland members are going to, continue to receive information from us as soon as we receive it. We literally, the moment we receive word about games that are impacted and what's going on with the schedule, we turn it around to our fans so they don't have to wonder. Right now we're through July 1st. And I think with the return of baseball also, our Birdland members can count on a lot of programming and maybe even some extra surprises in there that we're going to plan that they'll have access to as a benefit.
Which is great. Thank you. Jennifer, shifting a little bit, and it's actually some multiple part questions to this, but I'll say it. When you think about the tremendous sort of social justice reform that's happening across the country, you mentioned the Orioles connection to the community and some of the things that you guys have already started to engage in. Can you talk about ways the Orioles are encouraging and engaging youth as well as minority participation in the sport? Absolutely.
Going back to the Billy Joel concert that Councilman Costello mentioned, I was very excited to be a part of an event that we did the night before the Billy Joel concert, which was a charity fundraiser that was attended by a number of our corporate partners, and also some of our Orioles legends participated, where we brought music, songwriters, in to play. And we commissioned a special commemorative t-shirt that was called, they designed the concept, produced and sold for their benefit with an organization called Intersection of Change in Baltimore. And they have a program called Youth in Business. And these kids work together, and they actually run a store, and they create tens of thousands of income for the benefit of programs in their community. And we had partnered with them sort of lightly prior to that, but you know, the goal was to continue and possibly represent them in our team store as well. The other organization that we have aligned ourselves with of late is called the Food Project in Baltimore. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they produce a granola called CD Nutty. And CD Nutty, I'm very disappointed. One of the things about not having the ballpark open and not having our concessions is that we were going to launch CD Nutty at Camden Yards this year. I probably wasn't supposed to share that with you because we didn't have our preseason release, but since we don't have concessions, I think I would like to acknowledge them. CD Nutty, they make the granola, they sell the granola. When we did our winter warm up in December, they came and they sold the granola. And again, it's another way that we're trying to encourage entrepreneurship, and you're learning a lot of the skills that will benefit the kids and interact with us. I know, you know, we've talked a little bit more about expansion of some of our internship programs to get the kids engaged, because they often ask us how they can be involved with an Orioles in a more substantive way. So those are just a couple of examples.
Thank you. And I think it follows on, you were starting to go there as well. We have a couple questions about internships for Baltimore City school graduates and summer programs that may be with Baltimore City Public Schools, or anything to kind of get our students more connected.
We are doing our Summer Slugger program right now. In terms of internships, we select our interns usually in the fall for the upcoming season. And our interns are currently working with the change in our season situation. And that's another thing with the return of baseball. It's obviously about baseball, but there are a lot of jobs and other opportunities that are on the line with this season, including opportunities for kids who want to intern with the team. So I would keep an eye out in the fall, and I will make a note to our HR team that does a lot of the recruiting. I know in PR we have a couple of interns every year, and you know, see what we can do to better engage with Baltimore City schools regarding opportunities for graduates. I think your mic is off,
Yeah,
Shalonda.
thank you. Yeah, it was. Thank you. You saw I was doing a magic trick. Thank you so much. We had another request about a contact for the Orange and Black Give Back program. This person says that they work for the Baltimore station who serves homeless veterans suffering from addiction. And so they said they had an Orioles who volunteered in the past and would love to re-engage. Thank you for all that you and the O's are doing for the greater community. So a contact for the Orange and Black Give Back program.
All right. Well, I'm gonna raise you on that one. First of all, thank you for that compliment. But my buddy Brian Roberts, who is one of our Orioles ambassadors, talked to me about the Baltimore station back during spring training, which seems like a long time ago, but it wasn't. But he would like to bring me to the Baltimore station for a tour, so that we can look for ways for not just our Orange and Black Gives Back program with Rachel Renicky, who's our community development manager. She manages that program. So myself and Rachel and Brian will come for a tour, and we're gonna look and see how we can get our players engaged. And Brian has offered to lead that. So that's the best I can do. We were planning on doing it when we returned from spring training, and he was going to be in the broadcast booth. But now that things have changed a little bit, I'm not sure what Brian's schedule is, but I definitely want him to be a part of it because he's very passionate. He shared with me a lot about the good work that you're doing. So thank you. And really importantly, giving people, you know, hope that there's something on the other side of what they've gone through, and that there are people that really care about that. And I think that I don't see any problem with us getting our players involved. We have a lot of players who are very community oriented. So.
And that seems to be the overall sentiment. This is sort of the last question in that same vein. You talked about it a little bit, but I think just to elaborate, it's an appreciation of your commitment, of course, to downtown with the Orioles. Thrilled to hear about the additional programming. When you talk about sort of the concerts, and I know we talked about the expansion, Do you see expanding that to go beyond the concerts to include opportunities for schools or community organizations to use the stadium? I know you talked about the night before, but probably on a larger, more consistent basis of really trying to do that and get, everybody down to the stadium in that way.
That's a good question. Again, when we're discussing the next Camden Yards and what that looks like, I'll certainly bring that comment. But baseball is a long season, but there is a lot of time when we have the ballpark certainly available, and I could definitely see not just uses for kids in schools, but more community uses. That's part of the vision. It's hard to believe that this new management team has only been in place since I think it was about mid-October when we stepped into these positions, and certainly would not have predicted all of these unusual circumstances that we've faced in the past few months. But we do have a vision, and it hasn't changed from the very first moment, which is, again, generating more economic impact for Maryland and generating more downtown visitors that benefit our entire community, the small businesses and the kids. And we do a lot of programming during the season with schools. And we actually also sort of reinvented our game day experience program to be the Orioles Achievers program. And that was bringing in schools to the game and having a game experience. Unfortunately, we were not able to. We had a bunch scheduled for the season, but we had to kind of pull all that back. So I expect that with this, we're going to continue to listen to what our community wants, and we're going to take that into consideration as we go into this next. And I just have to really quickly, can I just do a plug? Sorry.
I like it.
This is my graphic. I will never be accused of being a great graphic designer at the Orioles organization. We have an awesome team who does that, but we are selling t-shirts to benefit the Colorectal Cancer Alliance. This is Trey Mancini, number 16. #fight, Orioles.com auctions. 100% of net proceeds benefits the Colorectal Cancer Alliance, which has been is a passion of Trey's now to educate the community about the importance of early detection. So I just had to get that plug in really quickly.
Thank you. Thank you. And the artwork wasn't bad. I wasn't bad. Councilman, so thank you, Jennifer. Ben, we're going to let you say a couple final words. Councilman, before we go to them, is there anything you want to circle back with now that we've heard some of the questions?
Yeah, thank you, Shalonda. I have two quick questions, one for each of you. Jennifer, on that last note, how is Trey Mancini doing?
So Trey Mancini, you know him as a leader on the field, but Trey Mancini is a leader in the clubhouse, and he never, ceases to amaze me. I've gotten to know him a little bit in the past few months, and once he was diagnosed and began treatment, sort of the long-term plan was for him to get involved in charity when he was finished with his treatment and when he was really ready. But he reached out to me about 6 or 8 weeks ago and said, Jen, I'm ready now. And I want your help, and I want to make a difference. I want to get the word out. I'm going to join the Never Too Young board of the Colorectal Cancer Alliance. And I want to use my platform to spread the message of early detection. And that's all that we had to hear. We immediately rallied and again produced the fight logo that Carolyn Means, John Means' wife, actually came up with that #fight. And then we sold the t-shirts. And I just spoke to I texted with Trey. I shouldn't say spoke. I texted with Trey on Saturday. We have almost 2,500 shirts sold in just a few days. And he's feeling good. He's going through treatment, and that's very difficult, but he's working out. I've seen Sarah talk a little bit in the media about how he's feeling, and we're just really proud of him and behind him, and look forward to him being back on the field as soon as he's ready.
Thank you. And Ben, last one's for you. What is your most memorable moment as a Baltimore Oriole?
Oh, wow. Gosh, that's hard to pick. You know, I was fortunate to get to play in Memorial Stadium and see Camden Yards open up and play in front of, 46,000 people for 2.5, 3 years, whatever it was, consecutive sellouts. But I guess my first big league start was awesome. But from a team standpoint, seeing Cal Ripken, kind of going what we're going through right now, everybody forgets, not everybody, but Cal Ripken is who brought people and fans back to baseball back in 95 after the work stoppage in 94, and the season was late getting started a little bit in 95. We had lost a lot of fans, and because Cal Ripken came back and broke Lou Gehrig's consecutive streak back in 95, it began to bring people back, because the average fan can't relate to hitting the ball 440 feet. They can't relate to throwing a baseball 95 miles an hour. They can't relate to some big league guys that make a ton of money, right? They can't relate to that, but they could relate to a guy that got up every day and he went to work, like so many millions of Americans do every day. You put your boots on, you put your belt on, you put your clothes on, you get up, you go to work. That's what Cal Ripken tried to do throughout his career. And because people could relate to a guy that liked to get up and go to work and wanted to be on the field every day because he knew he had to go feed his family like so many millions of people do, that began to bring people back to baseball. So if I had to pick one thing, I didn't even play in the game, but just to sit there and watch it, have a locker next to Cal for 4 or 5 years at Camden Yards, my relationship that I had with him and understanding the history of Lou Gehrig, the Iron Horse and the Iron Man would later come along, and Cal Ripken and break that record. That probably stands out to me in my career is probably the coolest thing I ever saw in Major League Baseball.
Thank you. Shalonda, back to you.
No, thank you so much. Thank you both for joining us. If there's 1 minute you had to say one final thing that you didn't say already, now is your time. Jennifer, if you have any parting words you want to leave with us.
Just thank you all for continuing to support the Orioles. I'm really proud to be part of Baltimore, and look forward to seeing you all in a few days. I will be visiting your businesses, and hopefully we'll see you at the ballpark sooner than later, and back to our favorite pastime, America's pastime.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Ben, anything?
I am just glad this baseball thing is just about over. I am so looking forward to getting back to my second home, which is Baltimore, where I grew up as a 21-year-old kid and played 7 years there. Can't wait to get my teeth on some crab cakes, maybe an adult beverage along the way, but I'm looking forward to being back in Baltimore. I hope the fans maybe at some point can begin to trickle into Camden Yards, maybe toward the end of the season. I hope that happens, but regardless, I'm glad baseball's back. I look forward to being back in Baltimore.
Thank you so much. But we're ready. We're ready for you back here. So thank you, Councilman. Once again, thank you for all of your leadership, the way you ask your questions, and just what you're doing for our city overall. Just talking about sort of what's next for our attendees. Please join us next week. Next Tuesday at 9 a.m., we'll have the State of Downtown Baltimore. Our special guest for that, we have Kevin Frick. He's the professor and vice dean for education at Johns Hopkins Carey School of Business. We'll also have Hao Yu. He's the CEO of Quandex Inc., and that's Johns Hopkins Carey School of Business. He's an alum there, but we're also going to get sort of some firsthand of what's happening outside of the country. And so really looking at how we talk about what's happening, the state of downtown, post-COVID, and we're going to transition that into what's happening now after COVID. And so it should be some really great information. We hope that you tune in and register now for that. So that'll be 9 a.m. next Tuesday, June 30th. So we look forward to seeing you there. Also, just want to circle back in a couple things that we mentioned in the beginning. You can find everything on our website. Please make sure that you're following us on Downtown Baltimore on Facebook, Downtown Balt, and DT Balt Events on Twitter, and then on Instagram, Downtown Baltimore. You can find all of this on godowntownbaltimore.com, our website. The webinar will be rebroadcast there, along with just some other information and hot happenings in our city. We could not do this without you, with everybody, and we want to make sure that our downtown stays vibrant, that we continue to do this. And people know my personal goal has been to get people to leave their stretchy pants and come back out, get out of the house, come downtown, go to a restaurant, enjoy, And we're going to make sure on our part that we're doing it safely. So thank you. Until next week, we'll see you again. Have a good one.